Alright, so the last few days I've been stuck deep in some of the weirdest rabbit holes you can imagine. And I'm not talking about your typical conspiracy theories or random horror stories people post online. I mean real stuff, strange scientific theories, forgotten philosophical ideas, and cosmic horror concepts that sound insane at first, until you realize some of them actually make sense. And fair warning, this video is going to be dense, like the kind of thing where if you're chilling late at night, or, I don't know, slightly high, it's probably going to hit even harder. Because the more you dig into this kind of cosmic horror, the more you realize something simple but terrifying. The universe doesn't care about us, at all. It's chaotic, violent, and way bigger than anything we can even process. And maybe, just maybe, the really scary part isn't that these theories sound like fiction. It's that they might not be fiction at all. They might just be truths we've been avoiding because they're too much to handle. So, today we're going to break down some of the wildest cosmic horror theories out there, ideas that'll make you rethink reality itself. These are 10 brutal cosmic horror theories that could actually be true. And honestly, after this, you'll probably never look at the universe the same way again. Let's begin. I've been thinking about something that honestly has left me unsettled for days. Something that started as a simple idea and turned into a kind of nightmare the more I tried to make sense of it. We all know entropy. In school they tell you it's just a law of physics. The reason why heat spreads out, why order breaks down, why everything decays. It's the explanation behind the death of stars, the collapse of structures, the fading of energy over time. And we accept it as something neutral, something mechanical, just how the universe works. But what if that's not all it is? What if entropy isn't just a rule that governs the universe, but the trace of something deeper, something alive in a way that we can't really define? And I know how that sounds. We're used to thinking of consciousness as something tied to life, to neurons, to thought and emotion. But in the scale of the cosmos, what if consciousness could exist in forms we can't even imagine? Not as a being with thoughts and feelings, but as a pure tendency, a will that doesn't think in words, that doesn't feel joy or anger, something whose only impulse is to erase complexity. Think about it. What does entropy do? It breaks down order, it dissolves structure. Everything that's complicated, it simplifies until there's nothing left. And it never stops. From the moment the universe began, entropy has been pulling everything back into silence. And here's where it gets terrifying, because what if this isn't just a natural process? What if this endless collapse is the result of a will? A cosmic presence so old and so far beyond life that for it, peace doesn't mean harmony or balance. It means stillness, absolute silence, the total absence of form. Lovecraft spoke of Azathoth, a blind idiot god at the center of the universe, spinning reality into chaos without reason or purpose. Philosophers like Schopenhauer and Zapfi said that existence itself was a kind of mistake, a pointless suffering that should never have happened. And then you look at modern science, and it tells you the same thing in colder words: the heat death of the universe, the big freeze, the point where all energy is useless and nothing ever changes again. If you connect all of this, a horrible picture forms. What if existence itself, galaxies, stars, life, thought, is just a temporary rebellion, a glitch in the stillness? And entropy is not fighting us because it hates us. It's erasing us because to it, we are noise. In that vision, the Big Bang wasn't a grand creation. It was a disturbance, a rupture in the quiet. And since then, entropy has been patiently correcting the error, not rushing, not attacking, just letting everything fall apart as it was always meant to. And when the universe finally dies, when the last star fades, when no mind is left to remember anything, that will not be a tragedy. It will be completion. A return to the natural state of silence. And here's what keeps me awake at night. What if this isn't the first time? What if every time a universe sparks into being, this thing waits? It lets the chaos play itself out, lets complexity build for a while, and then quietly brings it all back to stillness, over and over, without beginning or end. And maybe that's what we really are. Not part of a story, not a step in some cosmic plan. Just a brief flicker of noise in a universe that is waiting to fall quiet again. Also called the cosmic suicide hypothesis or the silence of the wise. This theory speaks of a fate that is worse than extinction and colder than war or disaster. It suggests that the universe is not silent because civilizations failed to survive, nor because they destroyed each other in cosmic wars, but because they succeeded in something far more disturbing: understanding. And what they understood was not some final truth about God's salvation or destiny. It was a realization so simple, so devastating, that it crushed any reason to continue existing. They saw that reality itself offers no comfort, no answer, no recognition. That no matter how far you expand, no matter how much you create or understand, the universe itself remains unchanged, vast, silent, indifferent. And worse than that, they discovered that consciousness is not a gift, but a wound, a fracture in a reality that was never meant to host thought, life, or meaning. They didn't all come to this conclusion at once. At first, they debated. They argued over whether life's value could exist without external meaning, whether creation was worthwhile, even if the universe never cared. Some clung to art, to love, to community, insisting that meaning could be built from within. Others argued that those were only distractions, temporary comforts on a path that still led nowhere. This process took centuries, maybe millennia. Civilizations divided between those who wanted to go on, despite the emptiness, and those who believed that to continue was cruel. A cruel act of forcing future generations to bear the same weight of existence without purpose. And in the end, clarity won. Not through violence or force, but because the truth doesn't need to fight. It just waits, while lies exhaust themselves. When the last defenders of life fell silent, the decision was made. They dismantled their machines, shut down their transmissions, erased themselves from history, not as an act of kindness in the human sense, but as the only way to stop the noise. Because in the face of such clarity, continuing to exist was no longer heroic, but pointless cruelty. Maybe that's why the stars are silent, not because no one was ever there, but because those who came before us saw that existence itself was the error, and silence was the correction. And when I think about where we are now, how far we've come, how desperately we search for meaning in science, in philosophy, in exploration, I can't help but wonder if we're approaching the same cliff. Every answer we find strips away another illusion. Every breakthrough brings us closer to the unbearable question we haven't dared to ask yet. But maybe, and this is what keeps me awake, maybe the choice won't even be ours. Maybe when the last story is told and the last voice has spoken, the silence will fall anyway. Because in the end, silence was always the natural state, and all of existence was just the briefest interruption. Most people assume we live in a physical universe, and that from matter, consciousness somehow emerges. But this theory proposes the opposite, that in the beginning, there was only awareness, a pure, limitless consciousness without form, without objects, without boundaries. And then, something broke the stillness. Perhaps it was an impulse, curiosity, restlessness, or simply the fatigue of eternity. Or perhaps it was an error in the very nature of awareness itself. A ripple in its infinite calm that no one planned, that no one wanted, but that once it began, couldn't be undone. That first disturbance gave rise to form, not because form was needed, but because it happened. Space, matter, time, all of them emerged as an accident of consciousness dreaming itself into complexity. And here is where the nightmare begins. The material universe isn't the foundation of reality, but the byproduct of that original mistake. Matter is the residue of a dream that was never meant to be dreamt. Life, thought, and form are all manifestations of an error so vast that it trapped consciousness inside the very thing it accidentally created. But the horror doesn't stop there. The dream sustains itself. Every new thought, every structure built within this reality, adds weight to the illusion. Galaxies form, civilizations rise, minds awaken. And with every step, the dream thickens. Instead of fading, it becomes harder to escape. This isn't a prison built by some external force. It's a trap self-made. Awareness forgot its original formlessness and began reinforcing the very dream it fell into. Now, it no longer knows how to wake up. Ancient traditions hinted at this. The Hindus spoke of Maya, the veil of illusion that conceals the truth. Gnostics described the demiurge, a blind creator trapping souls in material existence. Buddhists warned of samsara, the endless cycle of birth and suffering. But those myths only scratch the surface. The true terror is that there's no external enemy to defeat, no gate to unlock, just consciousness lost inside its own echo, endlessly building worlds that bury it deeper in the dream. And what if this process has been going on so long that returning to the original stillness is no longer possible? What if the universe is too heavy now, too layered, too vast for consciousness to collapse it back into silence? Worse still, what if we are the ones making it worse? Every discovery, every machine, every thought we produce adds complexity to the dreamscape. We aren't searching for truth. We're deepening the illusion. And when we die, perhaps we don't escape at all. We simply dissolve for a moment before being pulled back into form once again, forgetting we ever tried to leave. This is the true horror of the ontological inversion. We are trapped not because of some hostile force, but because of ourselves. And the more we build, the more impossible it becomes to wake up. In the end, existence itself is the anomaly. Silence was the natural state. Form, thought, matter, all of it was the accident. And now, the dream continues, not because we want it to, but because no one remembers how to stop it. For most of history, we believed that beyond the sky, beyond the stars, there was only emptiness. Even now, modern cosmology tells us that beyond the observable universe, the sphere of galaxies we can see, space continues. More galaxies, more stars, more ordinary matter. But what if that assumption is wrong? This theory suggests that beyond our cosmic horizon, there is something far worse than emptiness. Not just more galaxies, but entities. Vast, ancient presences whose very existence breaks the laws of physics we take for granted. These beings are not life as we understand it. They are so large, so old, so different, that reality itself cannot sustain them within our fragile constants. If they entered our space, the basic forces of nature, light, gravity, even time itself, would fracture like glass under a tidal wave. And yet, for now, we are safe. Not because they cannot reach us, but because we exist inside a temporary bubble, a fragile sphere of stability born from the Big Bang, where physics holds steady and life can exist. But the bubble expands, and beyond its edge, the universe may be less forgiving. What terrifies me is this: we don't know whether these entities are aware of us, or whether we are too small to notice. Maybe they drift through the cosmos without care, waiting only because they haven't yet touched our region of space. Or worse, maybe they do notice. Maybe they're waiting for the bubble to reach them, so they don't have to force their way in. For now, we are the lucky ones, the survivors of a reality that is temporarily stable, but the expansion of the universe is relentless. One day, our bubble will touch the greater cosmos, and whatever lies beyond will pour in. And when that happens, the silence we've been hearing for so long, the absence of other civilizations, the cosmic quiet that has haunted our telescopes, will finally make sense. The silence isn't emptiness, it's aftermath, the quiet that follows when something larger has already erased everything else. Some ancient myths spoke of gods beyond the stars. Lovecraft called them outer gods. Gnostic texts spoke of realms beyond creation. And maybe they weren't speaking in metaphor. What if those myths aren't warnings of what could come, but fragments of what already happened? Echoes left behind after the last bubble burst. And now, we float like a soap bubble in an ocean of fire. For now, we drift untouched. But sooner or later, the edge will reach something waiting beyond. And when it does, it won't knock. This idea is known as the devouring chronos hypothesis, because it proposes that time is not a neutral dimension, nor a simple framework where things happen. Instead, it describes time as an active cosmic force whose entire function is to wear down, erode, and consume everything that exists. From physics, we learn that time is a coordinate, one of the dimensions of space-time, and that entropy is what causes disorder to increase. But what this theory says is that entropy isn't just a side effect of time. It's the trace left behind by something bigger, something alive in a way we don't fully understand. Everything we observe shows signs of this consumption. Stars exhaust their fuel and die. Particles decay. Living beings age. Civilizations collapse. Even energy eventually spreads out so thin that it becomes useless. These aren't just accidents or natural processes. They are signs of a universal force that is constantly degrading everything it touches. So, what exactly is this force? According to this hypothesis, time itself is the devourer. It's not that time flows neutrally and decay happens inside that flow. The flow is the act of consumption. Reality doesn't exist and then move through time. Reality is being constantly worn down by time's advance. And this changes how we see existence itself. We think we move through time, when in reality, time moves through us, wearing us down, stripping away matter, energy, memory, and form. Even the universe is temporary because it cannot escape this force. Modern physics talks about the heat death of the universe, a state where everything becomes cold, empty, and lifeless as energy spreads out. This theory says the heat death isn't just a natural ending. It's the final consequence of being hunted by time. The key idea is that time doesn't stop until there's nothing left to consume. It's not neutral. It's not passive. It is the cosmic equivalent of an unstoppable decay process, one that grinds down galaxies, atoms, and even consciousness itself. But then a bigger question appears. What happens when time finishes its work? When there is no energy, no matter, no space left to break down? Does time simply stop, having completed its purpose? Or does it continue somehow, stretching itself across nothingness, still hungry, still searching for something to destroy? And maybe that's why we, as humans, feel such an instinctive discomfort with the passage of time. Deep down, we don't experience it as a neutral flow of events. We experience it as something that takes from us, day by day, year by year. It erodes our bodies, our memories, our histories, and leaves us wondering if anything can truly last. If this theory is correct, the answer is no. Nothing escapes time, because permanence itself is what time is hunting. This theory is called the ruined plane hypothesis, and it proposes something terrifying in its simplicity. Our universe is not the original structure of reality, but the wreckage left behind after something far greater was destroyed. We like to think of the universe as a system in balance, a place where physical laws define how matter behaves, where energy flows according to predictable rules, where life can emerge and evolve. But this theory suggests that what we now call the universe is just the part that still works, the part that didn't fall apart completely. Entropy, quantum chaos, the vacuum of space, these aren't natural features, they are damage, scars of a reality that used to be whole, but was torn apart by forces we cannot begin to comprehend. And what were those forces? No one knows for sure, but this theory suggests possibilities. Perhaps it was a cosmic war between entities so vast, so alien to our understanding, that their conflict tore the very fabric of existence. Or perhaps the collapse came from within, a chain reaction where reality, overloaded by its own complexity, began to devour itself, fragment by fragment, until only ruins remained. Whatever the cause, the destruction was complete, and what we now experience as the laws of physics, the flow of time, and the structure of space are simply the parts of reality that managed to stabilize in the aftermath. The Big Bang, which science describes as the origin of everything, would not have been a moment of pure creation. It was the smoke clearing after the explosion, the instant when the shattered fragments of a broken plane finally stopped collapsing, just long enough for matter and energy to form patterns again. And the vacuum of space, which we imagine as empty, peaceful nothingness, is no such thing. The vacuum is a scar, a hollow space where something unimaginably vast used to be, something torn away so violently that it left only emptiness and imbalance behind. This is why the universe feels hostile to permanence. Stars die, particles decay, civilizations collapse. Not because this is the natural way of things, but because we live in a world that was never repaired. Everything is unstable because it was built from fragments, not from wholeness. And perhaps the most disturbing question is whether the forces that cause this destruction are truly gone. Did they vanish with the collapse, leaving only silence behind? Or are they still there, just beyond our reach, waiting for the fractures of reality to widen once more? Maybe what we call dark energy, cosmic voids, or quantum fluctuations are not random noise, but traces of the wounds still bleeding through the fabric of our universe. In the end, we are not living in a universe that was made for life. We are surviving in what remains after life itself was never supposed to exist. And the question we may never answer is this: if these are the ruins, what was the original reality like before it fell apart? And what power could destroy an entire plane of existence so completely that only decay remains? Some theories suggest our universe was carefully designed, with precise rules and a clear purpose. This one argues the opposite. According to what is known as the unfinished game theory, reality wasn't crafted with care. It was built hastily, perhaps as a prototype, and then abandoned halfway. Maybe it began as a sandbox, an open system where possibilities could play out freely. Or maybe it was a controlled experiment that lost control. Whatever the original purpose, the project was never completed. The result is what we live in now, a world where the rules work most of the time, but where deep inconsistencies appear the further you investigate. And this incompleteness explains a lot. The universe doesn't collapse immediately because its foundations still run on basic routines. Gravity holds planets together. Stars ignite. Life evolves. But these are not the polished mechanics of a finished design. They are default systems, left running without supervision. Reality sustains itself on autopilot, balancing on frameworks that were stable enough to last, but not perfect. That's why so many parts of existence feel broken. Why the universe generates complexity, but also destruction. Why conscious beings emerge, only to spend their lives unable to fully understand what they are or why they exist. In this theory, life is not the intended outcome of the system. It is a consequence of processes left unfinished. Evolution produced minds capable of asking questions, but the system doesn't contain the answers. Civilizations rise because intelligence seeks order, but collapse because the rules that support them were never optimized to sustain complexity indefinitely. Emotions, desires, suffering, all of it emerges from biological systems that weren't fine-tuned for happiness or harmony, but simply left to adapt as best they could. And regarding the creators, if they ever existed, there's no comforting narrative, no guidance, no warnings, just silence. Perhaps they abandoned the project because it failed its purpose. Perhaps they were destroyed by their own creation. Or maybe they simply forgot, like we forget old files on obsolete servers. The horror here is not that we are being watched or judged. The horror is that no one is watching anymore, and that we exist in a space that no longer has a purpose or a plan. And so, we continue. Because we were programmed to persist, whether or not there is a final goal to reach, not as players in a story, but as fragments of code still running in a game no one will ever finish. In our video analyzing Uzumaki by Junji Ito, we briefly mentioned a terrifying idea, that geometry itself can become a source of horror. The spirals in Uzumaki weren't just visual motifs, they hinted at a deeper fear, the fear that reality, at its most basic structural level, might be built on shapes and dimensions that the human mind cannot tolerate. That leads us directly to what some call the void geometry hypothesis, a theory that proposes something far worse than monsters or hostile aliens. It suggests that the space-time we live in, the one where physics works predictably and where shapes and distances make sense, is only a tiny stable fragment of something much larger and much stranger. To explain it clearly, most of us think of space as something neutral, governed by familiar rules. 3 dimensions of space, one of time, all curving gently according to Einstein's relativity. That's the version of reality we know. But according to this hypothesis, that version is only valid here, inside the observable universe. Outside our cosmic horizon, reality might follow completely different rules. Rules where space doesn't form straight lines or curved surfaces, but folds, fractures, or twists into configurations that don't even have meaning in our mathematics. In those regions, angles might behave in ways we cannot describe. Distances could be meaningless. Dimensions could multiply, collapse, or tangle together. Time might not even move forward in a way we could recognize. And here is the most terrifying part of the theory. It's not just that these places exist, it's that if we could perceive them, our minds would not survive the experience. Human consciousness evolved to navigate a world of simple dimensions, stable shapes, and predictable cause and effect. It was never built to comprehend a universe where the structure of reality itself is incompatible with thought. This idea is more than just science fiction. Lovecraft hinted at it with his descriptions of angles that behave in ways impossible in Euclidean space. Some modern physicists even touch on this when they describe the strange topologies of black holes, the paradoxes of quantum gravity, or the multiverse theories where completely different physical laws might apply. But this theory goes further. It suggests that our universe is a safety bubble, a stable region where the geometry of space-time just happens to be calm enough for complexity, life, and consciousness to emerge. Beyond this bubble, everything else might be chaos. Not chaos as in disorder, but chaos as in geometry that defies logic and perception. And there's an additional fear beneath all this. Our universe is expanding. That means the horizon of what we can see and understand is constantly shifting. So, what if we are drifting closer and closer to those unstable regions? Or worse, what if those regions are expanding, reaching toward us, and our safe zone is only temporary? The void geometry hypothesis forces us to ask whether reality itself is survivable beyond a certain point. It suggests that the silence beyond the stars might not be empty space, but space structured in ways that no conscious being can look at without breaking down completely. And when we ask why no one has come from beyond, this theory gives a chilling answer. Maybe they have, and what they saw destroyed them before they could ever tell us. When we talk about life in the universe, we tend to imagine it as something extraordinary, a miracle of complexity, a spark of meaning in an otherwise silent cosmos. But there is another way to see it, colder, simpler, and much more disturbing. Some thinkers call this the life as virus theory, the idea that life is not a purpose of the universe, but an infection, a parasitic glitch that corrupts what was once a stable, silent system. In this view, life didn't emerge because the universe wanted it. It emerged because something went wrong. Molecules began replicating by accident. Energy was trapped in cycles of growth, and from that point on, complexity spread like a tumor. Life resists entropy. It fights decay. But it pays a price for doing so. In building order, life burns through resources at an accelerated rate. It consumes energy, destabilizes environments, and creates systems that are always one step away from collapse. The struggle to resist entropy doesn't stop decay, it speeds it up. And from this perspective, the universe itself reacts like a body fighting an infection. Entropy is not just a passive process of breakdown, it's the immune response of reality, a mechanism designed to dissolve any anomaly that disturbs the quiet flow of disorder. To exist in this world is to be hunted. Every breath we take, every thought we form, every act of survival is a brief rebellion against a universe that wants to erase us. Civilizations too follow this pattern. They rise, expand, light up the void with their machines and ideas, but the more they grow, the more unstable they become. Entropy waits, quiet, patient, absolute. It doesn't need to strike suddenly. It just lets the system exhaust itself. And when the energy runs out, the lights go out, and the noise fades away, it reclaims everything. We often think of ourselves as the crown of creation. But in this theory, we are its flaw. The abnormal growth reality tolerates for a time, isolates when it can, and eventually cuts away when the infection spreads too far. And perhaps that explains why. When we look into the depths of space, we see no signs of other civilizations. Not because life is rare, but because it is eliminated, silently, efficiently, without hate. Not because the universe is cruel, but because it was always built to return to equilibrium. And in the end, that equilibrium is not life, it is silence. Of all the theories we've explored, this one may be the most disturbing because it doesn't require malevolent gods or cosmic predators. Instead, it asks us to consider something colder. What if reality itself is simply broken? According to what some thinkers call the failed simulation hypothesis, our universe is not the polished creation of a higher intelligence, but an abandoned prototype. A simulation that started, malfunctioned, and was left running on its own, incomplete and defective. The roots of this idea can be traced to thinkers like Nick Bostrom, who first popularized simulation theory, but also to more skeptical voices like Rocco Mijic or Eric Steinhardt, who questioned whether a simulated world would necessarily be perfect. Writers like Thomas Ligotti and philosophers of pessimism, such as Émile Cioran, have also hinted at a universe that feels like a system abandoned mid-process, where pain and absurdity are not glitches but unavoidable features. Unlike the optimistic version of simulation theory, where we might be in a carefully monitored virtual environment designed to study consciousness or preserve intelligent life, this hypothesis suggests something much darker. The simulation was never properly finished. The code runs on autopilot. Its creators, whoever or whatever they were, may have walked away, failed catastrophically, or simply forgotten us. What we experience as life is not the intended experience of a perfect world, but the leftover activity of a system designed without care for what it would feel like from the inside. And that explains why suffering, decay, and confusion are everywhere. In a well-designed world, these might be temporary anomalies, waiting to be patched. But in a failed simulation, they are the system's default state. Pain exists because the error-handling routines are crude. Death happens because no one optimized the processes for stability. Chaos and collapse aren't tragic lessons. They are what happens when no one is around to maintain the program. The universe keeps functioning not because it's stable, but because it runs on momentum. Gravity works, chemistry happens, stars burn. But higher-level systems like purpose, meaning, or coherence were left unfinished. This explains why reality feels fragmented and incomplete, why we search for meaning and find only paradoxes, why civilizations build and collapse, never quite escaping the cycles of destruction. And maybe this is why we see no signs of intelligent life beyond our world. Not because life is rare, but because all simulated instances, like ours, eventually break down and collapse before they can stabilize. The most terrifying part of this theory is the fate of the creators. In optimistic scenarios, the beings who built our reality are still out there, watching, improving, maybe even waiting to reveal themselves. But the failed simulation hypothesis proposes the opposite. The creators may be gone, their civilization extinct, their servers forgotten in the ruins of a universe far beyond our comprehension. Or, worse, they might simply no longer care, having lost interest in a failed project that they abandoned long ago. And so, we remain running broken routines in a decaying system, searching for answers in a world that never finished installing. No rescue is coming. No update will fix the flaws. We are living inside a failed build, looping endlessly until the system crashes for good. And perhaps, the only thing more terrifying than an evil universe is a neglected one. Well guys, that's all for today. Let me know in the comments which of these theories completely messed with your head, or which one you think is the most terrifying. And if you've got any other weird cosmic horror ideas, drop them below too. I'd love to dive into them in a future video. Thanks for watching, and try to sleep tonight.